really don't have. He says, you really don't have to do this. I said, well, your wife asked me to. He said, why am I even questioning? So Joseph, that is a testament to Joseph's wisdom. Okay, and a great reason to know that he is the now president of Advent Health University. And our announcement today, our primary announcement today, is it should have came out an email, is on the 15th of February at 2:30 here in this church. There will be an inauguration of Joseph, 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. Thank you very much. So we are all invited. And Joseph, I'm sorry I won't be here because that is my youngest daughter's 30th birthday. You will forgive me. I think she'll think that's more important. But we love you. We appreciate you. And the future of healthcare is such that we need our educational institutions are even more important than ever were. So thank you for taking the mantle up on that. Okay. Last week, when I got retribution on Terry, you might have remembered, all throughout the lesson, he was poking fun at me for giving him Psalms, and then I got him back because he gave it to me a long time ago. So 12 and a half years ago, when we moved down here from North Carolina, and we were figuring out where do we want to land in church, because when we were here before, we went to Markham Woods, and so we're trying to figure all that out. And so I didn't know Lauren very well at the time, but I ran into him probably at work or maybe in the neighborhood. And he says, hey, you ought to come try out our class. He goes, we're going through the Old Testament using the chronological Bible. I'm thinking, well, why would I do a thing like that? That sounds more like torture to me. I didn't say that to Lauren, but we were doing that at the time, and it ended up being a very, very good thing. But I will tell you, when you read through the Bible sequentially, Old Testament, you do the same thing over and over again, and that becomes a little bit frustrating. And so in my mind, that was in the peripherals of my mind when the teachers got together last summer and said, okay, it's probably time for us to go back and revisit the Old Testament. So, okay, well, we probably need to do something differently about that. Well, while the script yet has not been written for how much detail or how long we're going to spend in the Old Testament, I'm deeply grateful for the way we started. The Yancey book, man, wow, you just can't say enough of it. He is such a gifted writer. And the beauty of Yancey is he's a journalist. He's not a theologian. So therefore his approach to things, try to understand things, is more probably in line with how most of us are. And so it was actually Zdravko's idea to start here. And he says, look, why don't you start with Yancey and then let the Spirit move you on where you want to go. And so when we're going to complete this in a couple of weeks, but I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am, because I'm finding it's greatly eye-opening. Terry mentioned last week that he didn't really care for Psalms, but when he saw how Yancey viewed it kind of resonated with him. And so the beauty of this, when we get to Psalms, we're not going to cover all 150 chapters, but because of the way we've approached it through him, we may be able to divide up and make it a bit more digestible. So today, Ecclesiastes. You're welcome. It's like, wow. I do the schedule and I got this one. It's like, I got nobody to blame but myself for this. Ecclesiastes, the good news is it's 12 chapters, it's not 150. The bad news, it's tough. It's tough, right? I hope you spent some time in it. And when you did, you probably realized why you hadn't been spending time in it. It is a tough slog. It is not a pep talk. It is also not something that occupies real estate in my Bible friends or Uncle Arthur's bedtime stories. It's just not that kind of report. If you had asked me 3 months ago, hey, what do you think about Ecclesiastes? I would have said, Ecclesiastes 9:5. The dead know not anything. Well, why in the world did I remember that? Well, because when I was a kid, that was the verse that they taught us to refute the belief of our other evangelicals that believe that you went to heaven after you died. So therefore they grounded Ecclesiastes 9:5, the dead know anything. Okay, so that's what I remember about Ecclesiastes. Well, I might have remembered that there was something about futility or chasing the wind or nothing you understand. But I probably remembered much else. So Today, I've got a whole new perspective on it. There's pearls of wisdom in there, and it is extremely relevant to us today. The book is 3,000 years old, tells a story that's highly relevant. In fact, if you read or scanned through the attachment that Luann had on the email that went out this week, the 4 flavors of existential despair, if you read that and you take a look at Ecclesiastes, that very bright, talented, licensed clinical social worker basically gave a professional paraphrase of Ecclesiastes. And her memorandum or her letter was not in a spiritual tone. It was just very, very practical. So with that, after we pray, Walter's going to have prayer for us. We'll get started.
Our Father in heaven, thank you that you are our God and that you know us intimately in a way that we do not know ourselves. We're glad that the scripture says that your eyes are roaming the earth all 24/7 to see who you can do good. And I want to thank you for that because I want you to do me good, as well as all our people here, your people, and your children around the world. Father, as we open your word, we know that the gentleman that wrote the book, Solomon, was given a gift of wisdom that no one had before and no one had afterwards. So, Father, we thank you for that. And we thank you too, because as we look at his life, we know that he had his highs and lows. And yet, we know too that you, through the power of your Spirit, brought him through. And we want to thank you for that. And we pray for the blessings and presence of your Spirit in our lives at this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Wow. Thank you, Walter. You know, as Walter was praying, it just reminded me, and I hate to get up here and gush so much, but you know, our teachers have been doing an absolutely sensational job. I am so thankful to be a part of that. But then as I think about what a blessing, Walter, you have been to our class, and not just him, but I'm going to call him out. The comments that he makes are so enlightening, and it just says, this is a group conversation. This isn't that. And so thank you all for your part that you played. Okay. For those of you in the back, I'm sorry, this is going to get bigger. Question for you. How many of you have either heard of or read BibleProject.com? Not very many. Good. This is going to be revolutionary. Oleg does. Great. How many have ever seen a video where it looks like something like this is happening? Okay. Thank you, Terry. A few. So this is absolutely sensational. And so I today am going to rely on the talents of others, which is really what we do all the time, but rely on the talents of others because this group of people has a remarkable ability to tell a story verbally and also visually. And so, for example, if you go into YouTube and pull up Bible Project Ecclesiastes, you will see them have about an 8-minute vignette where they go through and tell you an overview of the Ecclesiastes, and along the way, they kind of tell you the story. Now, I am a late baby boomer, all right? And I was raised at a time when, gee, you didn't really want to listen to anybody else other than Adventists. And so I thought, well, I don't want to introduce something to the class that, you know, may not jive with it. So I went to the website and said, what is their, lack of a better term, their mission statement? And this is what it said. From page 1 to the final word, we believe the Bible is a unified story that leads to Jesus. Sure, I think that works for us, doesn't it? This diverse collection of ancient books overflows with wisdom for our modern world. We let the biblical story speak for itself, and we believe the message of Jesus will transform individuals and entire communities. I'm in, folks. That absolutely resonates with what we're about. And so I'm here to tell you that maybe with the possible exception of Revelation, if you would like some very good overviews, go to BibleProject.com and go to some of these books. I think you'll greatly enjoy it. So the plan today is to use this and break this diagram into what I'll call 5 digestible chunks. We're looking to cover Ecclesiastes at 30,000 feet. The intent today is not to go in and pick verses and verses and verses and digest it. It is to say, what is the global message of Ecclesiastes? And so what we're going to do is the next slide will take a portion of this and we'll go through and chat about that. So permit me to have a monologue for about 15 minutes. And we're going to use this. And then after that, we'll have a dialogue about what you've just heard. And then with that, we'll conclude that section. And then we will move into 4 or 5 of the main points that Yancey made, and we'll have that discussion. So that's the plan today. So here we go. First of all, you open up Ecclesiastes, the very, very first verse says, the words of a teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem. Upper left. The teacher. Well, it's pretty clear, and I don't think I've heard any argument that the teacher in this book is Solomon. Okay, but the thing is that it's unclear if Solomon was actually the author of the book. But most people believe that while he is the teacher and he's really occupies 95% of what the book says, there is another person who has remained anonymous that is presenting him at the beginning and then summarizing him at the end, that everything in the middle is what he wants us to hear from the teacher. Okay. And so the perspective that you're getting today is, while the teacher is a subject, the author is someone different, and he's taking what the teacher says and he has a message that he wants us to hear, possibly that she wants us to hear. So what is the message of the teacher? Hevel. Hevel. Everything is utterly hell. You're asking me, with the possible exception of Oleg, who I think knows Hebrew, what on earth are you saying, Kelly? I don't see Hevel in my Bible. And that is because the translators translate it in different ways. If you have a New Living, if you have a New International, it's going to say meaningless. Everything is meaningless. If you open up the Eugene Peterson paraphrase, he's going to say smoke. If you open up the New King James or the King James, it'll say vanities, vanities. The point is that there's many ways that you can describe that, but this particular group of people says, if you go back and look literally at the term hevel, which is the Hebrew word, it says it's about vapor. It's about smoke. And he uses it 38 times in his book. And it's really, he's saying that life is temporary. It's fleeting. Okay? It's an enigma. It's a paradox. Over on the left-hand side, as human beings, we say, my goodness, there's so much beauty. There's so much goodness in the world. Gee, that must be a cause and effect of why that happens. But then all of a sudden, something comes in and snatches it away. And we're going, wait a minute. Our view of the world is not exactly how the world is. I can't understand it. I can't grasp it. Okay, where's the justice? Because we see, wait a minute, bad things happen to good people, and that's just very, very confusing. So about the time you go along and you think you got life figured out, boom, something comes along. Heaven. It's like chasing the wind. Okay, so he's saying life is a paradox. It's unpredictable. It's elusive. What he's lamenting. As Walter said in his prayer, the smartest, richest, most successful man, king in our history, he is the one that's saying these words. Wow. What's that all about? So, what is the author's basic goal? Remember we said the teacher, then you have the author. The author's presenting this, and what does he really want us to find out? He says he's going to allow the teacher to deconstruct all the ways that we generally pursue to find meaning and purpose apart from God. Think about when you were young. I wanted to have a job. Gee, I wanted to make some money. Grew up poor. Gee, I think rich is being better than poor, or having money is better than poor. I want to get a job where I can make some money. So we pursue wealth. Then you go, well, wait a minute, I want to have some fun. I want to make sure that I have a lot of pleasure in the world. And then later on, all of a sudden, well, gee, I've got money and I've got pleasure and I've had some. Now I want people to think I'm important. I want to have status. I want to have a legacy. I wasn't going to tell this, but I think I am now. We got a friend of mine I was talking to recently, retired fairly recently. And I see him quite a bit. We play golf together. The last couple of years, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it to retirement. I want to retire when I'm 60. And I don't know if I'm going to make that. Oh, really? Well, guess what? He retired before he turned 60. And he had accumulated enough wealth to be able to do that. That's great. Okay. So now he's free to go and pursue pleasure. But guess what? He's unhappy because nobody's calling him to ask him his opinion on it. Yeah, I guess who it is. Some of you in this room knew who I'm talking about. Leave it at that. We do. Hevel. Hevel doesn't mean life sucks. Hevel means life is hard. Just when you think you want something, you get it. Oh, it changes. And these are all things, okay, that we're pursuing in our own way as human beings. The author is saying, you need to be thinking about something else. So that takes us now to the basic message of the teacher. Now, a lot of stuff on this slide. I'm going to try to focus you and direct you where to go. Really what you have here is the teacher is talking pretty much in a monologue from verses 1 through 12:7. Okay, and he's doing that in two major constructs. He's going back and saying, hey, you think all these things are important. I want you to consider the aspect of time. Okay, and what does that mean? Well, looking on that left-hand side, you see all those various symbols, and what those symbols are intended to say is, look, as life goes on, we develop technology. We build nations, and they rise and they fall. The farmer, the person in the middle who had a hard time trying to figure out how to build a fire, probably now sits in his house and figures out how to water his crops via a computer. All these things that we do try to make our life more meaningful and more pleasurable, ultimately, they don't deliver meaning. And he says, because time will eventually erase you and me and all that we care about. He says, hey, go climb the mountain. See if the mountain cares. The mountain was there before you. The mountain's going to be there after you. You're just a blip. You're unimportant. The sun still rises and sets. The ocean still breaks on the beach. Life goes on. You're here. You're just kind of a wisp of the wind. Well, man, this is really encouraging. This is the Bible that we're reading. And oh, by the way, we're reading this from arguably the most successful man and the smartest man in history. And he's telling us this? Well, that's what time does. And then if that's not even more fun, he comes along and says, guess what? Life is this, and then you're going to die. So let's celebrate all the hell you've had on earth, and then you're going to go die. Well, man, that really makes me feel good, doesn't it? And he says, it doesn't matter if you're rich. It doesn't matter if you're poor. It doesn't matter if you're smart. It doesn't matter if you're foolish. It doesn't matter if you're an animal. It doesn't matter if you're a human. You're still going to die. Yancey quotes Pascal in his book, and he says, the greatness of man compared to animals is that he knows himself to be miserable. Let's think about that for a second. So time and death kind of encapsulate, create this sandwich, and in the middle, the teacher goes through and talks about these things again. If you look at that middle section, you got wealth, career, status, and pleasure. On the right, you got wisdom and fear of the Lord. Two different things. Ultimately, they're all hevel because there's no guarantees on any of them. Let's think about the career on the left-hand side. We said earlier, man, I want to grow up. I want to have a career. I want to make money. I want to be important. Well, guess what? You spend all your time devoting your career. You ignore your family. Your kids don't even know who you are. Then lo and behold, you reach an age where now you have all this wealth. You're going to retire. And guess what? There's nobody around for you to enjoy it with. Think about that. Well, gee, I don't want to
miss was a pretty girl in between there too.
Well, then
A pretty girl to have a family with.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly. And so now you say, well, okay, don't let me be a workaholic. Let me be a pleasure seeker. So then you go see it, you seek pleasure, you say, man, life's just about having a good time. It's really all about me. I can, okay. Well, guess what? Monday always comes because at some point things come to roost. So then he says, well, okay, career and pleasure, that's a bit of a mess. Well, let's go over on the other side. Well, actually somewhere through here, he has little nuggets and he has little pearls of wisdom, 5 or 6 places throughout here where he'll say different things about enjoy a good meal or this or that. And he says, look, the wisdom and the fear of the Lord is better for you, but they in and of themselves are hevel because they ultimately don't lead you to solving all of life's questions. He goes, life is not meaningless. It's just an enigma, just an enigma. So the good news just continues. And he said, okay, now how are we going to live life? Time makes it all kind of crazy. You're going to die. Gee, career and pleasure isn't going to do it for you. Wisdom, well, it kind of gives you a little bit of better, but where's all this going to go? And surprisingly, the author kind of arrives at a spot where he says, accepting the hevel is really your best option. Accepting the hevel because life is a gift from God. Think about your friendships. Think about your family. A good meal, the one you're going to have in about an hour and a half, right? Sabbath meal, best meal of the week. Think about a sunny day. Oh my goodness, today, whoo, perfect. This is why people move to Florida, right? They forget it in the summertime, but now they really love it. Today is perfect. These are all gifts from God. But wait a minute, don't lock yourselves into all these individually because they're fleeting. Does everybody get along with their friends all the time? Does everybody get along with their family all the time? 2 weeks from now, all of us are going to get together for Carly's 30th birthday. I guarantee you we're not going to enjoy ourselves the entire time. We're just not. But I'm thankful that I have the opportunity to do that because ultimately there's meaning in that. So when you summarize it, he says, accept your fate, enjoy the simple things, because life is full of exceptions. Just embrace that and live through it. So that's what the teacher was saying. Now the author comes along and says, okay, I'm going to wrap this up for you. The teacher's words are meant to steer you towards me. They are intended like the shepherd's pointy staff towards the sheep. Okay, it may be a little painful, but they're trying to steer you in the right direction and steer you towards wisdom. However, he then goes back and says, yeah, go pursue wisdom, but don't have wisdom be an end in of itself because wisdom is hevel. Okay, wisdom is hevel because it's never going to allow you to fully understand and explain life's puzzles. But you're probably going to be better off because of it. And finally, you walked in here knowing this, and this is the conclusion. 14 and 15, or 13 and 14, fear God, keep his commands, and this is the whole beauty of humans. For God will bring every deed into judgment, every hidden thing, whether good or evil. Again, that isn't new information to you. You walked in here, you know that's what it is, but all of a sudden, when you look at that very simple message in the context of everything that he just told us, what better option do you have? Because pursuing the meaning of life is endless. This is the perspective of the richest and wisest man in the world. This is the perspective of a man who spent 3 years in a concentration camp, never knowing whether he was going to make it one day for life. So all of a sudden, he had to grasp meaning in a very different way than this guy did. So it doesn't matter where you are in your status of life, you're still dealing with these things about what is life's meaning. So when you sum all that up, this is Kelly's summary. Life under the sun hell. S-U-N. Life under the sun? You fill in the blank. That's the conclusion of the monologue. So with that, I know what word I've got here, but I'd be interested to know what your word is. Heaven. You guys, hang on, you guys know that I can't listen and write at the same time. Heaven.
Eternal,
1 second. Raise your hand. I don't know where you're coming from.
eternal.
Eternal. Joy. Somebody else,
Joy.
joy. Wait a minute. I'm gonna pull a Bob Briggs deal on you. What? Life under the sun is joy, Albert? Really?
Keep going.
No, we're gonna stop there. Ask all the apostles about that. But anyway, I get your point though. I had to poke fun at you. Anybody else?
A few years ago, a gentleman that taught Old Testament Hebrew, he took Ecclesiastes and the front part of the book and the whole book in essence, and he went back to Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, because Abel means devil in essence. And how they, or a fourth of relation died one day. Cain remained. Everything he built, all the cities, came to an end by the time of the flood. And the only thing that remained for Adam and Eve was Seth, which is what God put in place. And that, in essence, is what we are looking at in the Son, because God put him in place of me.
Hmm.
And that is what gives meaning to my life. Without that, joy, heaven, and eternal is kind of like pebble. Apart from the sun.
Albert?
The whole idea of sun, S-U-N, and hevel. Even in the 24-hour cycle, the sun goes away for a period of time in its darkness. So when I said joy for the sun, S-O-N, it depends where in time we're looking at. If you're looking at the sun down here, he helps us get through what's here, which is a lot of hooey. But if we're looking at the sun in a heavenly, banal Garden of Eden, that's joy.
Thank you. We're gonna come back to that. Notice, if you can read this term judgment here. Rich and I had a little fun on judgment a few weeks ago, okay? Judgment is a word we don't like, but he's saying, what does judgment mean? We'll come back to that in a second. I want to go on. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what my word is. And I don't think it's going to disagree with you or you. It's hope. Because no matter where you are, if you're a rich man or a man who's surviving hope, the hope is in the sun. Without the sun, we have no hope whatsoever. Okay, monologue's over. Now I want to bring the story up 3,000 years to the present. You know, in this day and age, and in fact, we like to put labels on things, right? You got this term called existentialist, or you got this concept called existentialism. And so I've looked up the definition 3 or 4 times and I still can't figure out what it is. And maybe that's the point. But do we have anybody in the room, before I open my mouth and tell you how much I don't know, do we have anybody in the room that knows a fair amount about this and would like to educate us on it?
Well, after setting it up that way, who'd want to answer?
Well, I'm trying to fake then I'm really interested in what you say when I'm really not. But okay. Well, then I'll tell you what, I'll throw something. Try this. So this is one of the definitions of an existentialist. Okay. The person who believes in a philosophy, i.e. a system of ideas, according to which the world has no meaning and each person is alone and completely responsible for his or her own action. So what's the meaning of life to an existentialist? If you're now thinking like an existentialist, then the answer to this question is both elementary and infinitely complex. You have the answer, you just have to own it. I'm still not sure exactly I know what that means. But I guess the question is, and by the way, Yancey, I got this out of a heading. He says the first existentialist, right? So the question is, was the teacher an existentialist? He said, well, we just learned here. I'm seeing the head kind of going, I'm going,
One of the prime examples of existentialism in Peru.
Hang on, wind it up, go back. I'm sorry, start over, please. Start.
One of the great examples is Victor Hugo, this French philosopher and writer. And that is what he pretty much thought of life. You have to own it. And his great works, are powerful. And he never comes up with a solution. You just have to own it. And it left you pretty much empty.
So the existentialist, basically life is whatever you make of it. It could be nothing or going to be something. It's up to you. Is that kind of close, Loretta?
Well, it goes back to the word you used. There's no hope in this type of philosophy.
I think you think about the writers you talked about, Camus and Voltaire and Dostoevsky, all those. My assumption is that they weren't believers in God. Is that not true, or that is?
Not all of the French existentialists were atheists.
It again?
All of the French existentialists were atheists. But the father of existentialism was theologian Soren Kierkegaard. Yeah.
Thank you, Randall.
You're welcome.
Should have known he ran. Yeah. So I guess it's kind of confusing, isn't it? What I sent the article that was sent by Luann, a couple of comments. He said, accepting the finite nature of an existence can be an acceptance to gratitude. Accepting the finite nature of your existence can be an acceptance or a path to gratitude. She says, graciously take on the role in which you find yourself, leaving room for the mystery of how exactly you've been cast in this part. She goes, and by accepting the fact that you will die, you're accepting now that you're very much alive. And that kind of goes back to his point. Alive. I've been given a beautiful day, a beautiful group of friends. So can I just enjoy the moment? Next week, something bad's going to happen and we'll do it. But for now, let me just enjoy it. Kind of seems consistent with what the teacher was having to say. I don't know, Randall, you're looking at me. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about another thing.
Yes. Oleg.
Just a thought. So when we read Ecclesiastes in Hebrew mindset, is the preacher, which is Kohelot, which is the one who basically reveals the symptoms. So the preacher is the one who reveals the symptoms, and that's why world needs existentialist philosophers as well as people who think that the world is meaningless, because it reveals the symptoms. Here are the symptoms, and this is where we are going to: death or despair or meaningless experience. But what we see in Christianity Christianity offers healing. So it's a response to the extensionalist perspective, as well as a response to what is happening in the book of Ecclesiastes. Yes, after reading the book of Ecclesiastes, you may feel that everything is falling apart. But that is exactly why Jesus in Matthew 12 said, the Queen of Bathsheba came to whom? To the preacher to listen to his wisdom, to Solomon to listen to his wisdom. But I'm telling you, one who is greater is here among you. And that greater will provide the answer to the symptom. Now we are entering into this healing period.
Thank you, Oleg. Whoa, okay, now it's the action is starting. Rich, I think I saw your hand up, or did I not? Okay, all right, we'll go here then.
The correlation between Romans chapter 3 and Paul's description of the nature of man is here.
Go ahead.
That basically that man is condemned because of his sin, and he is basically there are no options. The law's not going to save you, and that basically you're condemned to die.
Mhm.
And so what's next? But now, then the gospel of presented.
Okay. Tim.
Yeah, one of the things that, I look, when I read the Bible, it reflects our journey in this life. There's so many aspects of the Bible that we can connect with, all the way from Exodus through Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes, I think a lot of us have had times in our life when we've felt there's no meaning or we feel alone. And the answer is, like what Oleg said, was God, Christ. And so it again reflects our journey. And it makes us understand a little more our smallness and the bigness of largeness of the world.
And we're going to get to that in just a second. Absolutely. Walter and then Rich.
Part of Christianity is this idea that we are in a path searching for something that as we search and as we become more diligent with time, we will eventually find it. As opposite to the reality that there is a God that is always present, that has never left you, that is with you all along the path as you are seeking him. And he already found you. And here you are anxious and desperate, where maybe you need to be like a baby and be happy when mommy finds you.
Oh, man. Love that. Love that. Rich, did you have your hand up now?
A little humor. This kind of sounds like retirement. And you have to find new meaning.
And I'm gonna, Bob, don't even comment, but Bob told me, Bob retired not long ago, and he is now volunteering at hospice, and it's providing him with extraordinary meaning. Right? I mean, in fact, I love it because I'm thinking, man, I went through hospice with my mother. It was a phenomenal experience. Bob, I may go do that when I retire. I think it's a wonderful idea. All right, did I have another hand? Was that you, Terry? Anybody? Okay.
Play more golf, Terry. Kelly.
That doesn't bring happiness. There's about happiness 5 times in that round. The rest of it is you're just managing the heaven.
Well, there's a really interesting human problem, and it's called depression, and it's associated with suicide. So back in my working days, we used to work with this psychiatrist, and with the patients who have severe depression, none of the medications work. And so we line them up and give them a brief anesthetic, and we shoot electricity into their brain. This is called ECT, and they have a seizure. Okay, and so we're trying to, these are people who don't think life has meaning. Oh, here, I'll help you. I'll give you a seizure. It's a weird dynamic. So I asked the psychiatrist once, I said, listen, these people think life has no meaning. We rush up to them and say, oh, let me help you. Yes, it does. Here, we'll throw electricity through your head. Isn't that a little rude? And there's a famous study, which I guess it is, of people who have tried to kill themselves in San Francisco, jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, except the study involves the ones who survived. Okay, and there's a small number who survived. Almost every one of them said on their way down, they changed their mind. Oh, so he said, all we're going to do is buy a little time so they can change their mind. I'm thinking maybe that's what the earth is all about here, you know, it's like people are supposed to figure out somehow on their own, somehow by maybe the way we treat them, that life is not such a bad thing. Yeah, it's full of bad, but whoa, the upside can be so enormous that I'm willing to wait and see. And that's maybe where the hope comes in.
Could be. Okay. Amazing the comments that you all have made. You must have read Yancey, or you're just really smart, because Yancey goes through and has like 3 major categories. This one, he says, remember, we're trying to diagnose why is all this hell in the world? Okay, well, what's going on? Well, why are we not getting what we want? So the curse of getting what you want, he says, he asks himself the question, he goes, how can the bleak despair of Ecclesiastes issue from the era of Israel's golden age? He said, when things were going so well, the days of slavery in Egypt might produce such a gloomy, I reason. Okay, he's talking to himself. He says, when he goes, I look at this, and it comes out of the time of prosperity and not out of the time of gloom and doom. So then he goes on, and he says, curiously, I learned that existential despair, whether in the teacher or Camus, which is one of those writers, tends to sprout from the soil of excess. Existential despair did not germinate from the hellholes of Auschwitz or Siberia, but rather the cafes of Paris, the coffee shops of Copenhagen, the luxury palaces of Beverly Hills. What a powerful observation. A powerful observation. Who had it? Yes, Terry.
I like the fact that Solomon may have been the writer. Let's pretend he was. Because if he was the smartest person in the world and he was the richest person in the world and he could pursue anything he wanted in life, that just tells you that after you are the wealthiest and the smartest, you cease, you still have this innate longing for whatever's next, and finding solace in the here and now and the what is something that most of us don't perfect well. My grandmother was good at that. I don't know very many other people that have been.
And let's just, Terry, let's just take you as an example. We all know what.
Just don't do that.
Hang on. We'll pay you back for song. And I know the answer to the question. In the work world, are you ever satisfied?
Probably not.
Absolutely not. Nor should he be. If he was satisfied, somebody else would have his job. It's that simple. And so in the grand scheme of life, we are always searching for something better. The teacher's conclusion on this point is that exactly what Terry just said. He goes, you will never succeed. You'll always want more. So therefore, you're good. He says the teacher's advice, be good, but not too good. Be wise, but not too wise. He said, this is a fine example of the golden mean of behavior. Golden mean. He goes, after tasting the extremes of both sides, the teacher, this is exact quote from Yancey, after examining the extremes of both sides, the teacher settles in halfway between hedonism and suicide. That's a strong statement. Powerful. Go on to the next topic. This is exactly what one of you was saying. The burden of progress. Kelly's term on this is what I'm going to call the law of unintended consequences. What do we mean by that? He says most of our problems have come about ironically because of our desire to progress and improve and make life better. Bob, that was shooting electricity into the grain. You're trying to help that person. Did you help that person? Maybe, maybe not. He said, Huh?
It actually works.
I remember years ago when I was up in North Carolina, I've got a group of psychiatrists. I said, hey, we need to do ECT. We can make money doing that. You know, my focus was about making money. It wasn't about the care of the patient. That was their job. But the point is, you're trying to do that. The most technologically advanced countries are also the ones marked by family breakdown, drug addiction, abortion, violent crime, homelessness, and suicide. I'll come right back to you, Walter. Here's the punchline of this. The ruler over Israel could sense within himself and his nation the burden. He learned the hard lesson that Moses had tried to teach the Israelites centuries before. Whatever humans touch will bear a fatal flaw. No matter how hard you try to make things better, you may solve that problem. You may create a whole host of other ones in the process. Somebody, do you have a comment?
The irony of it is that Solomon, with all the blessings of God, is also the one that set up Israel for his eventual destruction, because he brought the idols into Jerusalem and they were never ever taken out until Nebuchadnezzar came.
Yep.
Powerful, isn't it?
Ultimately, it was Solomon making it about him. We know that's the fatal flaw of all of us. And so Solomon, you know, when Solomon built the temple, it was all about God. But then after he had 700 wives and 300 concubines and all this notoriety, people start flocking to him. Must be about me.
I don't look too bad.
Somebody else have a comment on this one? Yes, Paula.
So what struck me is you're talking about progress and getting what you want. So you look at some of the wealthiest Americans. You've got Jeff Bezos, you've got crazy guy who owns Twitter now, Elon Musk, you've got Bill Gates. So look at what they're doing. You know, Elon is SpaceX and all, he's trying to get to the moon or what Mars or whatever he's doing, is pursuit of the next big thing. Bill Gates, he's trying to better the world by his work in Africa, you know, vaccines and care. And those are two very opposite ends of the spectrum. Now, I'm not commenting on their personal lives, but one is trying to make the world a better place. The other one, the world, it's all about him. That's my opinion. Whether I'm right or not, I don't know, but that's what it appears to me. And so I think you can get what you want, and it doesn't have to be this way, but you have to have, I think, a selfless heart to make the life better for people versus making it all about you and what you're doing. And maybe going to the moon or Mars is going to make life better for people on Earth. I don't know. But
I wonder what's in Gates's mind. Is he just really a good guy, or does he somehow have a relationship with God? No, I'm glad Warren Buffett's another way.
right. I mean, they've developed their foundations and they're incredible. Warren Buffett, he's not giving his money to his grandchildren. I mean, he's
I think he's going to give each of them
$5 million apiece.
I thought it was one. You know, and then he's going to put it all in Gates's fountain, and that is inspiring.
hey, you know, that Bezos ex-wife, he's donating hundreds of millions.
Okay, Bob.
Well, there's an interesting contradiction here, and I think the basic belief that I've heard growing up all my life of the fall and Eve's foolishness at the tree was, oh, none of this would be happening if she hadn't eaten the apple. Satan hadn't done his thing, whatever. And yet here we're saying, whoa, when you experience all this goodness, that's when the depression comes. So it's somehow we need this so that we can appreciate that later. Isn't that contradictory? Do we actually believe that we could have enjoyed pure holiness and bliss forever without understanding what darkness is and pain? I mean, if you're constantly happy and joyful, that becomes your normal and you don't have anything to contrast it with. So That seems like a disconnect to me.
I want to respond to that immediately. And Nancy asked the question, is it possible that God permitted the entire tragic experience of Israel's nationhood in order to prove a point about the visible kingdom, any visible kingdom, which is really what you're saying. You have to experience this now to recognize there is something better. Arthur?
This last text, God will bring every work in judgment. Is that referring to the afterlife?
One more time.
Is the last text referring to the afterlife?
This is not a text, that's just a quote. That's just a quote from Yancey.
For God will bring every work into judgment, whether every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Is he referring to the afterlife?
I need a theologian to answer that question because I don't. Lake, did you hear that?
Because it seems to me that's what he's saying, and that is encouraging, because it means in the end, justice will be done. That, the answers, we have all the answers here. People, he says, good is not rewarded. In many instances, and evil is rewarded. But in the end, it seems here that it is referring to the afterlife.
Now I understand what you're saying, and yes, I believe it is.
One of the responses that I had to this was, I really need a humble heart, which is really a good thing. But then maybe a greater need would be to just allow Jesus in, because I think that he is humble. And I think that he has all the qualities I dream of. And he's able to come and superimpose all the evil that is coming out of my heart and cover it all up and make that so for eternity. That's pretty awesome.
That is a paraphrase of what you just said, I think. Terry, you had a comment?
In Ecclesiastes for me, Kelly teaches me that no matter what you pursue in life, no matter what your station is in life, at the end of the day, outside of a relationship with Jesus, it doesn't matter. It's all meaningless. Ecclesiastes basically says, you're right, we all die. And the desire of the human heart's the same, no matter where you are in life. And only a relationship inside of Jesus can bring anything close to contentment or joy that you can experience here if you allow that relationship to let you experience it. Because you fight that as a human being, regardless of who you are, where you are. It's only a relationship tucked inside of meaning, which is Jesus' life, provides everyone meaning that allows you to survive and not run around in despair.
Yeah.
What does it profit a man if he gained the whole world but lose his soul? That's what Terry is saying. The other things I'm thinking about though is whoever wants to save their lives will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me will save it.
Elmer?
So I was built to live forever. We messed it up. We as a human race messed it up. We were made to live forever in a perfect existence. What we're left with is trying to live a good enough life through the help of Jesus, because we cannot do it on our own, to get back to that existence of a perfect life. And even the best among us of human nature fails often. Thomas Edison failed 1,000 times before he created the light bulb. So, I mean, we fail all the time. The question is, are we looking at this life or life later?
That's a good segue to this next
So
thing.
you got an online comment.
Okay.
Go ahead, John.
Good morning, Kelly. Just wanted to comment and thank you so much for the class today. I am someone that has pursued the meaning of life vigorously, and who knows all the things that I've done to get it. And it wasn't until yesterday that I was able to find the true meaning of life. I'm actually here at the hospital with my cousin. He's been here for the last 30 days between life and death on the hour. And as I was leaving, his son, my cousin's son, says, "Let me walk you to the car." And as we were walking towards my car, he says, "You know, I am an only child." And I says, "Yes, I know. My son is also an only child." And he says, "I don't know what I'm going to do when my father dies or if he dies, because I can't live without him." And of course, at that very moment, a very special moment, it struck me. And I just told my cousin and said, "You know, I'm so hoping your dad will put it through, somebody that I love very dearly. But if he doesn't, I'll be here. I'll be your dad." At that moment, somebody that I've never seen cry, is a tough dude, he started to tear up, and he came over and he hugged me. And at that very moment, I found the meaning of life, which is all about love. It's about Jesus, it's about a relationship with Jesus. But what that really means is meaning only comes through love. And I know that's poetic and we talk about it to nauseam, but it became real to me. Without love, there's nothing.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much for sharing. Folks, I have a personal story that I want to tell you, and I'm going to get to it. But we've all talked, our conversation has now narrowed to a glimpse and a view towards eternity, because if we don't have that, we are in toast. I just sat and stared at this last night and just stared at it. This is from Yancey. "I've come to see Ecclesiastes not as a mistake, nor as a contrived form of reverse apologetics, as a profound reminder of the limits of being human." Romans 12:3 says, "Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought." I'm just a human being. In 3:11, he says, the quote, "And he has set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. In the end, the teacher freely admits that life does not make sense outside of God and will never fully make sense because we are not God." Here, I think that squares with what you're saying. But we're humans. Are we ever going to get that? The last, Ecclesiastes calls us to accept our status as creatures under the dominion of the Creator, something as few of us do without a struggle. So humility that John was just talking about seems to be the key to doing whatever. So I'm going to close with this. This isn't extremely related to this week, but this is something that happened to me in the last couple of weeks that has a powerful impact on me, and I want to tell you the story. For those of you who've been in this class a lot, from time to time, I talk about the fact that Melody and I are animal lovers. Those of you who know us well know that to be the fact. And we're particularly dog lovers. And so 2 dogs that we have currently, you see in the picture here, and I'm going to focus on the picture on the left. Well, the one in the upper left is a 2-year-old that we got as a puppy. And the one on the lower right is a 4-year-old that we got last summer because we lost another dog due to old age. And so therefore the 2-year-old was too rambunctious for us, and we need to get him a playmate. Okay. So the 4-year-old on the lower right, we actually adopted from a shelter. Well, not a shelter, but a rescue agency. And for most part, things have been beautiful. But sometimes life takes a twist. So 12 days ago, I was taking the 2 dogs on a walk, something that I've been doing almost every day for more than 10 years. So I've done the walk thousands of times. We have about a 1.5 mile circle that we live on. I'm about 3/4 of the way around. We're cruising along, having a great time. It's just me and them. A couple of dogs they've seen before over here on this side are doing their thing and they get amped up and, yeah, whatever. But, we pulled them in and we kept going. It was about 1.5 minutes later. Another little bushy dog and their owner is walking around. What I'm learning about them is when they see dogs they've seen before, they'll get amped up. It's not that big of a deal. They saw this thing and well, it wasn't another dog. It was something they needed to go get. Okay, well, I'm trying to reel them in like this. Okay. They can't get to it, but what happens oftentimes when dogs see something that gets them excited, if they can't get, they'll turn on each other. So they turned on each other. Now, they're not the biggest dogs, but they're about 75, 80 pounds. They are going at it. It's hard. I cannot pull them apart. So I'm going, what's going on here? What am I going to do? So finally, the best thing that I could possibly do was to get on top of the 4-year-old, the one on the lower right. And as I got on top of him and tried to hold him down, all the while he's trying to get the other dog, and the other dog's attacking. They're trying to attack the dog while I'm on top of it. Well, somehow I was able to, I really gave him a nice left hook. I gave him a left hook in the face. It got his attention. It's like, oh, okay, got his attention. And he sat crouched down and looked. In the meantime, the dog I'm on is still amped up. He's still trying to get to the other one. He's here. He grabs me on the face. Paul, I know this means something to you. Years ago, he grabs me on the face. I go, ooh. Well, it's almost like when he did it, it could have been a lot worse. He didn't pull, he just held me. So I just kind of slowly but surely worked my way out of his grip. At that point, finally, they weren't going after each other. We were all just exhausted. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? Because if I get up, they're going to go at it again. Well, I'm going through that. The 4-year-old starts licking my face. He starts licking the sweat, the blood, the tears, the dirt. He's licking it off my face. By the way, I'm dramatizing this just a touch. So he's licking my face, and it's almost as if he was saying, Dad, I'm really sorry that I did that. He says, for 4 years, I was chained up. Nobody loved me. He goes, you've given me a home. You've given me a brother. You've given me a couch to lay on. You've given me food. You give me treats. I cannot imagine a better life than what you've given me. And I just responded to something for my instincts. And the very person that I hurt is the person that I love the most. And so figuratively in my mind, I look at him and then he says, oh, by the way, do you forgive me? And I said, in my mind, absolutely, I forgive you. I forgive you before you even asked, because I have chosen to love you. And I've chosen to love you, and it doesn't have, and my loving you has nothing to do with your actions. You get the metaphor. I see some of your faces, but it gets better than this. I've looked back on that experience a whole lot, and it's waning. I never really got mad. I punched my other dog in the face, but I was never really mad. And I'm thinking, why am I not mad about that? And finally, I realized I'm the adult. I'm responsible. I'm the one that is supposed to be putting them in an environment that is safe. And the fact that this all happened, is it his fault or is it my fault? Looking back on it, I could have done something differently to prevent the entire thing from happening. So then that got me to thinking a little bit more. Well, in the relationship that I've got with God, clearly my position is the dog, right? So why does God love me even though I don't deserve it? And I believe he says, because I'm responsible. You're not in this world because you asked to be. You're in this world because I allowed you to be. And therefore, I have allowed you to come into a world that is an evil place, and as you are subject to evil forces that you have no ability to combat. And because of that, my patience with you is never ending. And I'm going to love you continually. Hevel? Yes. Bleeding? It happened. A month from now, I won't be thinking of it. Today, it's impactful. Today, that is something in my life that has caused me to think more deeply. Now I'm sharing it with you. You're going to go home, you're going to eat, you're going to forget about it. Okay? Today, this is impactful. And today, I'm going to enjoy the gift that God gave me and the learning experience that came out of being attacked by my own dog. Meaningless? No way. Hevel? Perhaps. So that's kind of closing on a somber tone, which we can't do. Here's the cool thing, okay? Here's the cool thing, that God is not Hevel. God is eternal. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm very grateful that while we think we know God knows everything, there are still 4 things he doesn't know. So let's say this together as we leave. God does not know a sin he does not hate. God does not know a sinner he does not love. God does not know a sin he won't forgive. God does not know a better time than now. Amen. Happy Sabbath. Next week, Greg will be here to talk about the prophets and God talking back. So we'll see you then.